Hey, everybody, it's Doug Green, and I'm the publisher of Technology Reseller News. This is a special podcast for TR Publications and the Cloud Communications Alliance. And I'm very pleased to have with me again Iain Sinnott, who is the European Development Chief of the CCA. Iain, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, Doug. Good to be here. Glad to see you again.
Glad to see you, and I'm really excited about our conversation today. Obviously, we've been doing a lot of podcasts all year long. Last 3 years long about AI. Lately, we're talking more and more really about how it's being applied, what it's doing, and so on. And our conversation today, connected to AI, started with your glasses, because I sort of said, hey, those are too cool for school. But you had a story about them. They're sort of connected to COVID a little bit.
Yeah, well, there's two theories. Either I'm an aging rock star, which is an image I'm prepared to live with. And the other is that I'm dyslexic. But as a salesperson, you recognize sometimes you're handed an advantage. And during COVID, where it was very hard to turn a meeting into a human conversation, which you need to do in order to sell or in order to have a proper business conversation, starting the meeting off wearing what looks like sunglasses evoked some sort of conversation. And when I talk about dyslexia, pretty much everybody knows or has somebody in the family who has dyslexia, and it makes for an interesting conversation. So my blue glasses are very useful as an icebreaker, and were even more useful as an icebreaker in COVID. But it is always interesting to bring things like dyslexia and human challenge into the business environment. And as we started to touch on while we were just having a chat before we came on, AI is doing many things, but for myself as a dyslexic, for other dyslexics, this could be an absolutely huge change in the way that we operate across the business world and how we operate across the schooling world and our hobbies as well. So it's a pretty exciting time for us, because we've made our money on our difference, because often it makes us more curious or bigger problem solvers. You know, it's quite well documented that there's a lot of dyslexic in the sales industry. We seem to thrive on the human relationship and the conversational development, but some of our weaknesses are now being picked off or properly supported by AI tools, and it feels like a good time.
So AI is a tool, let's start there, that gives but can also take. So the give part seems amazing, right? In other words, what you're saying is that the hidden talents, the talents that were hidden because of some ability limitations in the past, this could be maybe overcome.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's strange, because we go through life trying to diminish our weaknesses, but recognizing your weaknesses is very important, and especially when you can pick up a tool that diminishes the effect of that weakness. So I particularly have a visual memory problem. It means I can't remember what words look like. So I read slowly. I have to read every word from letter one to letter finish. And sometimes I still don't work out what it is. So I process more slowly. And the visual memory problem then becomes, if I've read it, it actually doesn't reside in my brain as well as if I've heard it. So my oral memory is very much stronger. Now, if you take that into, how it's translated, I accumulated less information at school. I couldn't take that information into the exams. So the only things I passed at school were science and maths based problems. I can work science and maths problems through. But everything English, I had to write, if I was 16, I had to write it like a 10-year-old to try and pick the words I could spell. And the examiners marked it as if I was 10 and gave me a fail, So this was a challenge. But now I've got an AI assistant. I can ask it to research something for me in great depth, and then it recounts it to me verbally, which means I retain it more completely. So I can obtain more information, I can retain more information, and then I can bring that out in the findings or the recommendations or the strategies that I'm helping people to work through. Equally, when I speak it and I have the AI help me with the drafting, I spell everything really well now. So that's great. So I think in 41 years of business, I am now more efficient and less challenged than I've ever been, which is great for me and probably great for a whole bunch of people who've fought the good fight since they were at school or while they were at school. And this is a really interesting set of tools for us to use.
And let's consider the fact that in the arc of history, if you will, right, the high value that we historically placed on written word was, after all, also a technology. So
Yeah.
we invented a way to transport ideas over time, and you could write a book, and you could write this and that, and then someone else 100 years later could read it, and so on. That's still extremely valuable. But now what you've just said is, with AI, we now have a new process to pass on human knowledge and so on. But we immediately come to a problem, or at least a challenge. How do we make sure that what we're doing is human? How do we retain the humanity in this process?
Yeah, and that's a question of personal responsibility and the avoidance of laziness, which unfortunately is quite a challenge nowadays. But we have to recognize that this AI is a tool, and it's a tool that we need to use wisely, because if we rely on it, it will lie to us as much as anything else. It will misrepresent us if we allow it to. And, we talk about the hallucinations of an AI system, but it will wander, it will drift, it will move away. So within the strategy of using AI has to be the part where you challenge it, to challenge itself, and where, again, you don't step away from it to a degree that you become reliant on it. It should be reliant on your input in order to get it right. So again, I've babbled on about personal responsibility in many different discussions, and AI use is no different. We are responsible for making sure that this remains a positive tool, not a negative tool.
So this, I think, hits on this. I'm going to put this up: governance. I'm hearing an awful lot about this in podcast after podcast about companies, trying to do what you just said, putting rules and limits on AI. Maybe not necessarily limits, but making sure that AI is not abused.
It's guardrails, I think, is what we're looking for. And there's a few here. First of all, there's the security side of things. We need to use tools where we can track and understand where the information is held. Sovereignty in Europe is one of the biggest words in circulation now. We need to know where the data is. We need to know how the data is being used, and we need to understand whether that affects us downstream in terms of the people we can work for, the services that we can offer, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got sovereignty as a key lead. Then you've got to marry that with the sort of management control, the interrogation from a hierarchy point of view. But then you have to make sure that you're not limiting the people in the experimentation that they can do, because speed of change happens when you give people the latitude to play with stuff and to investigate and to challenge. So you've got this balance between governance, sovereignty, security, and freedom to explore and test and trial. So I think in organizations of all sizes, that's probably a good question to start asking across the organization. What is the balance? What is the risk? What governance do we have in place? And as we said in the article that we worked on together earlier in the month, what problems will our staff then solve if we give them the freedom to do it? What are the questions that they would answer? How would they redesign their own work if they have the freedom to use tools which they know to be controlled and safe within our environment? So It's a partnership between technology, the workforce, and the management sort of governance.
And Iain, you described this process as possibly the rise of the intelligent worker.
Yeah, well, this goes back to this again. I would encourage everybody to grab and digest as much knowledge as possible, because it's just helpful to have in your own mind a way of critiquing stuff. And you know, I'm a history nut. I like using history to tell me whether or not, you know, things have changed, or we're just looking at the same problem that they did 100 years ago. It just feels a little bit different. So I'm not saying that people shouldn't bring knowledge into their head at whatever speed they can accumulate, but the intelligent worker is somebody who can go and find the information that's required and use it well. And the AI tool will help people to use it in a different way, and to use it wisely, and to challenge and that sort of thing. So if I can go and get the knowledge that I need, even if I didn't get it when I was at school or during my training within my workplace, I've got more to work with. And then I have the tools to interrogate it, manipulate it, challenge it, and then use it within our drafting. So the intelligent worker is the person who can balance knowledge with the use of AI tools, in my opinion.
And let's stick with that for a second, because that balance, I think that is that the challenge, to figure out what that is.
I think it's a challenge both for the individual and a challenge for the business. So, you know, there are a large number of people who are still concerned with the effect of AI on the jobs market. And really, we need to help as many people as possible identify how they can be on the upside rather than the downside. Now, you and I both know in business, there is normally a winner and normally a loser. We say we want to win-win, but we want to do well for our company. Well, each individual worker should be encouraged to look at how AI could make them more valuable within the organization, because the human brain isn't replaceable, but some of the tasks we ask it to do are. So we need to start working with each of the employees on how we can create the right balance, and then roll it back to that early point that we made. It's the people in the job who know which elements of the job are either underutilizing the human brain, using up time unnecessarily, or are just dull and repetitive and bring no joy when you're doing them at work. So, you know, ask the workforce how to change the work and the work processes and the workflows, and we'll probably get the most productive companies with the highest growth curve.
Iain, the reason for the smirk is, you know, I know, and everybody knows that there's going to be this company, and they're going to look at AI and they're going to say, it's Marco Polo in China. I have found the solution to my dreams. I can fire everybody now. Yep. I don't need to have contact center workers.
I was talking to a friend of mine who's in sort of IT systems and network design for a bank. And there is a huge pressure suddenly on software development writers, software coders, because Claude can code, right?
Right.
Somebody needs to model it longer to make sure that you're not cutting off your nose to spite your face, or you're not taking a short-term gain to take a long-term hit. And the problem that comes with some of these moves to an AI solution is exactly what you just alluded to. The job that you're putting to AI is actually one of the crucial steps in the development of the next generation of senior worker. So whilst it's commercially attractive to replace them, in the long term, you will run out and therefore have to recruit somebody from outside the business who did learn to do the steps that the senior players can do because they went through the process, and the currently junior players can't do when they become senior because they were never asked to. So I think there's some very careful modeling for businesses. And if you look at it to a degree, if you're making your career, maybe it's beware the company that's on a build to sell or a build to close, because they don't really care about the long-term structure. They care about now and having a great balance sheet and being really attractive on their cost base versus their incomes. But sustainability of these businesses will be based as much on the growth and capability of their human resource as it is on their immediate, sort of commercial balances.
As we start to close up our podcast, and we're talking about, the rise of the intelligent worker, that you've I think touched on something about sort of what humans bring to the workforce. And I want to talk about gut.
Well, yes, I agree that. I think it's two ways as well. Yes, it's going to struggle to develop a natural gut. It will have a statistical gut. It will have a what's being said in the wider world gut. But it's not going to have a real feeling about something. So where do we challenge it because our experience says it's wrong? That's human behavior. That's where you need humans in the mix working alongside. Equally, however, and the older workforce has suffered from this before, we tend to fall into the gap of, well, we've been doing it this way for a long time and it works. Therefore, there isn't a new. There's just maybe improving the old. And I think the newer workforce coming in has something that isn't gut, but it's just inspiration that says, I know you've always done it this way, but have you ever thought about doing it a different way? So I think the human, whether they're young or old, brings in that nuance of critical review that we can't afford to lose as businesses. Otherwise, technically, we'll all become the same business, right? Because the machines will eventually come to the same conclusion and competition will be dead.
Iain, I want to really thank you for joining me today. I want to just give you a brief chance to talk about your work in terms of development of the Cloud Communications Alliance in Europe. I think our talk today has sort of touched on the cutting edge work that you're doing to keep CCA right there in front of AI communications.
Well, yeah, I mean, the CCA has a lot to offer the communications world and to help, especially our European membership. So I'm working with our European committee and the European members to take on some challenges which are pretty new, and that is that the world looks different at the present time. The geopolitical forces have required us to think differently about sovereignty, about communications. And whilst innovation and using the modern tools as they flow from the hyperscalers and businesses in the global market, each of those particular countries and the sensitive businesses or government bodies within those countries now has to think of things slightly differently. And I think that's a space where we're really seeing where the CCA can commune information, can commune conversation, and really help the European countries produce well thought through and constructive new policies and strategies that, as I say, still embrace the spirit of change and innovation that's in the global world, but keeps a much more mindful control on national security and nationally critical infrastructure.
Well, Iain, I really want to thank you for joining me today. I'm looking forward to our next conversation. This is an open topic, but for now, thank you very much indeed.
Well, thanks, Doug, and expect to see more people in blue glasses appearing on podcasts because the dyslexic are coming.